Right, so let's get into the last part, which is switch case. So switch case, right, so a bit recap. So last time we have looked at the multiple selections on the if else, well, the if and then if else, multiple if else, and also nested if. Right, so example, we have if and then the expression of it, and then we can have any statements, and then we can have our else, and then we can have another if else within it. Right, so this is the multiple if else. So in your code, depending on what you want your program to do, you might just need if without the else. Right, or as we saw last time as well, where the example was going through the grades, we can actually use only the if part without the else. That still will give you the same result. Right, so the other one that we covered about the nested if. So it's basically you have another if else within your if. Right, so always remember that when you want to use if else, you can have if by itself, but you cannot have else by itself. Right, so if you want to have else, then you need to pair it with if. It's only that when you have if, you need to write the condition of it, and then when you get to your else, it's basically the opposite of the result of your condition over here. Right, so that's roughly about the if else. Right, okay, so looking at the switch statement, it says over here it is similar to an if statement. It also allows a variable or expression to be examined against a list of options. Right, so similar to if else, you have like the different options, the if else, and then you have another if else. Right, but in the switch case, each of those options, you would call it as a case. And then for each of the case, different tasks can be performed. So they can have different statements that will be executed. Right, so the way that you would draw the flowchart of it, right, so similar to the if else, for the switch, you would have your start, any input, output, you can have it over there, right? So same as usual. But then for the switch, you would write it within the rectangle, right? So you would write the keyword switch, and then the variable, the expression, or any of the condition over here, right? But it's within the rectangle. And then the different cases that you will have, so that is your if else, you would write it in the diamond shape, and you would write case and then whatever value that you want to compare it with. Right, so we'll look at example after this. So this is just to show you overall how would for the switch case flowchart would look like. Right. And also for the switch case, you need to write the true and also false. Right. So as I mentioned before, you should not write T or F. You should write the proper way, which is, where is my annotation? Which is writing true with small letter T, and also whatever that is false with small letter F. Right? And then whatever statements that you have, similar as before. And then with the switch case, you need to have this break at the end. Right? So we will cover about why we need the break and what happens if we don't have the break. Right, so the rest of it are just the same. It's only that the different part is you would write switch and then the condition inside of it in the rectangle, and then some of the options you would draw it in the diamond shape and you would write it as case something. Right, so that's roughly the idea on how to draw the flowchart for the switch case. Right, so the syntax of it, let's see, it says, okay, so you would write switch. You would write switch and then the variable or expression, or any value that you want to compare it with. So you would write it within the brackets. And then you need to have the curly bracket. Right, so this curly bracket, you can have it at the end over here. So this is just the matter of style where you prefer to have it. Right, so for the expression, it says it is known as selector, can be any type. So for the switch, it can be any other type. For the if, the condition or the expression, it needs to be Boolean. Well, it will give you the output of it as Boolean, whether it's true or false, right? While inside switch, it can be any other type, right? So it can be any value like 1, 2, 3, or some letters, or even some sentence. Well, sentence, yeah, you can have sentence as well. Right, so it says here value can be integral, type char, byte, short, int, string, any other type, right? So that's what you can have within the bracket for your switch. Right, and then you would write within your switch, you have case and then some value. So this value would relate to whatever your variable or expression that you have over here. And then some statements, and then you would write break, semicolon, and then as many cases as you have. And you can also have a default. So this default is basically the same as the final else, meaning that if any of these cases does not match what value you want, it will go to the default straight away. Right, so this will make more sense when we look at examples with some values. Right, and also another thing about the way of writing it, right? So you can see that there are spaces over here, right? So it really up to you whether you want to have the space or not, right? So in Java, it doesn't matter about the space, because sometimes when I write it, is my t-shirt, right? Sometimes I would write it something like I would have my switch variable or expression. Then I would write my, for example, case 1. And then some of my statement, semicolon. Right, so statement something like system.out.println, something, semicolon, and then I would write my break within the same line. Right, so it doesn't really matter how you arrange it. But try to make it as easy for you to read through it. Right, it can be something like that, or you can also write switch, something like case 1, and then you have system.println, something over there, and then you would have your break aligned to your system.println or any of the statement. Break. Alright, so it's up to you how you want to write it, as long as it makes it easy for you to read through your code. Right, so you can see that this is slightly different than the example over here. Right, so always remember that any spaces, it doesn't mean anything in Java. Right, so any question about the syntax and also the flowchart before we go to an example? Everything okay? There's no problem with the video or anything like that, right? Because if it starts to lag, let me know. Okay. Okay. Right. So looking at an example of it, Right, so see that, so in this one, the first one is using the if else or the multiple if else. The second one is using switch, right? So in this one, the program, what it wants to do is to take the user input, or not really the user input because we hard code it over here. So basically it takes the month and then it tries to match the value that we have, and it will display what month is it, right? For example, if we enter 2 over here, it will show month is February. Okay, so in the if else, we say that if month equal to 1, we will print out month is January. Else, if month is equal to 2, it will display February, right? And then else, if it's equal to 3, it will display month is March. If it's not 1, 2, 3, it will display not the first quarter of the year, right? Okay, so in this one as well, right? Right, if you want to match which else belong to which which else belongs to which if, so this belongs to that one, this belongs to that, this belongs to that, right? So basically in your code, it will check 1 and then check 2, check 3, then only it gets to the else if none of this turns out to be true. Right, so as I mentioned last time, you can rearrange the way you write this one so that it's easier to read through it by having some tabs, or you can use the braces or curly bracket. Right, for example, let's open JGraphs. JGraphs over here. Well, I cannot copy paste this one. Okay, now I can. Right, this one. Let's have a new file. Okay, let's use what we have. This one. Let's rearrange it. Wait, did I not copy properly? Month is January. Month is February. Month is March. Else, not the first quarter of the year. The year. Okay, this one. Well, in your notes, it rearrange it as something like this. So let's compile it. Alright, so there's no error. If we run it, it shows month is February. Right, so because we already understand what this code is doing. Right, so just to show that which else belongs to which if, right, so that it belongs to that one. If you want to rearrange of writing it, you can have something like this. If else. Right, if you write it this way, then you can see that this if else is one pair, this if else is another pair, and this if else is the third pair. Right, you can also have it on different line where you would separate the if and also the else. And then you can rearrange it so that you can see the if else much clearly. Right, so basically this multiple if else over here belongs to the else. Right? You can also put the braces or the curly bracket. Else. Oh wait, that's not the closing of the else. So this is end of my class. You can always write the comment if you get confused with it. End of main. Over here is end of else. This is your else. End of end of. Right, so you can put any comment that makes sense to you, right? So this is just to give the difference of this is your first else and this is the end of the second else, which is this else. Right, so try not to get yourself confused with it, because of course when you have multiple if else and you have braces, a lot of braces, then it can get a bit confusing not knowing which one belongs to which. Right, but the good thing about JGraphs is when you point at it, it will highlight where or what the pair is. Right, so you can kind of like see it. Well, I did not put a curly bracket for this one. And then also this one. Right. In the example, it doesn't put the curly bracket or the braces because at each part of it, they only have one statement. Right. So when you have one statement, you don't actually have to write the braces. Normally, you would write it if you have two or more things that belongs to the if or belongs to the else. Right, so compile it, run it, same as before. Alright, the only thing I did was rearrange it and add the braces or the curly bracket. Okay, so going back here, right, so that's what we know about the if else, right? So that's what we covered last time. And you saw earlier that it can be a bit confusing because it has layers of it, right? So we can change that to using the switch case, which when you write it, it can be much simpler, right? So what you would do is you would write switch, and then the variable or what you want to compare or to see, you would write it within the brackets, right? So you would write switch month and then your braces, and then inside of it, the one that you have equal to 1, equal to 3, 2, equal to 3, you would use that as the cases, right? So you will write case 1. So case 1 is this part. If that is true, if that is the same of it, what you want to do is print out month is Jan and then break, right? And then the same one for the else, if month equal to 2, you write it as case number 2. And then for this else, if month equal to 3, you write it as case 3. And then the last else over here, where when it is not 1, 2, 3, so anything else, you would print out not the first quarter of the year. So that is what your default would be over here. Right? So from this code, you can kind of like see how you can change from your if else into switch case. Right? So whichever way that you want to do it, so it depends on which one you prefer and which one you are more comfortable in writing it. you can start writing in if else and then later on change to switch case. Right, because they still represent similar things that what you want it to do. Okay, so let's look at the code and try and run it on jgrabs. Let's just copy this one. I'll just comment those out. Right, because the int man still equal to 2. Paste it. Quarter of the year. Right, so you can see that in this part, we only have a few lines rather than when we have our if else over here. This can still be rearranged. So it's missing break. Let's write it within one line. EUK case 3 and then break and then default. If you want to align them to be aligned at the same line, you can do it, right? As I mentioned before, any of the spaces, it doesn't mean anything. Right, so let's try and run this one. Let me clear this one first. When we run it, it still gives us the same output from before, right? So it still shows month is Feb because we are passing the variable, well, not the variable, the value of the variable. So basically over here, it's checking for the cases, which one has the value of 2. Right? So what it will do is it checks the case 1. 1 is not equal to 2. So it goes and check the next one, which is case 2. 2 is equal to 2. So it will print it out and then break. Right. Okay. Right. Another way if you want to go through this code is you can run through the play over here. Hopefully you have tried it before, where it will show you which line it's reading. Let's have 1 second. Right, so play it. Oh, that's pretty quick, right? Because it tries and match which case is the correct one. Right, you can see from earlier, let's have 5 seconds so that we can kind of like see it. Okay, 5 seconds. Clear this one. Right, so it goes to the switch. And then from case 1 to 3, it selects which one is the correct one. Right, 2 is equal to 2. And then it ends it straight away. If we compare that with the multiple if else, so I'll just comment this one out and have this one again. Okay, so let's have this one running. Okay, 5 second delay. Right, so it checks the first one, is it the same or not? When it is not the same, it checks the second one. Right, because that is the same, so it prints out month is February. Right, so this play thing over here, this is quite useful if you just want to see when we have different kind of like selection, how it selects or which one it selects to get the output that it shows. Right, another thing is about the break, so I'll comment this one out again, and of else. right? What we saw before, it shows month is Feb and then end it, right? But if we don't have the break, I'll just remove all the breaks, right? What will happen is if you run the code, it will try and match it. So month is 2, 2 is the same as this case 2, so it prints out month is Feb. But because we don't have the break, what it will do is it will continue and print out or execute whatever statements that you have in your code. So it will go through your case tree and then your default part, right? So that's why in the output over here, when you don't have the break, it prints out month is Feb, month is March, and then not in the first quarter of the year. So always remember that for the switch case, if you don't want the rest of it to be executed, you need to write break at the end of it. For the default, you don't have to write break. Even if you write it, that's fine, but it's pretty redundant because default is the last line within your switch case, right? So even if it runs the last one, it will end it straight away after that. So you don't actually need to write break at the end of it. Wait, let's just show if you have it. If you have it, when you run it, it doesn't make any difference. Right, so any question about the switch case and also about the multiple if else, how you can change from one selection to the other? Right, so that is okay. If that is okay, we have other example that we can go through. Alright, so this is about the month. Another example over here is it asks the user to enter a number. So it just say that in the instruction, enter a number 1 to 5. But then if you look at the switch case, we only have case up until 5. Right? So if the user follows what we already say over here and enter 1 up until 5, that's fine. It will print out something that based on whatever the user input. Right, so let's run this code. This one, I'll remove this part. Okay, so it goes to the next line. Let's rearrange it. System.in semicolon. Okay, enter a number. X int. And then we have our switch. The different cases. I'm not sure why it puts the bracket over there. Here is number 1. Here is number 2. And then number 3. Number 4 and also number 5. Okay, let's remove that one. So you might want to write the code yourself rather than trying to copy and paste as what I did. Rearrange it. Okay, so looking at this, what is missing? Right, so to write your switch case, you have your switch and then the variable or expression, Okay, right. So your friend said default, so we don't have default over here. Another one is always remember that you need to have the curly bracket. Right, for switch case, you need to have it. The opening and also closing. Okay, so say that we don't have the default. If we don't have the default, it is still fine with our code. Right, so I can compile it just fine. Oh yeah, and also remember when you want to use scanner, you need to import the java.util.scanner or java.util.asterisk. Right, if you want to import all of it. But anyway, let's just import the scanner class. Alright, so let's clear that one. If we run it, okay, it asks the user enter a number 1 to 5. Wait, let's end first. 1 to 5. Okay. Alright, if we enter number 1, it goes to the switch, and then 1 is equal to case 1, so it will output number 1. Right? If we run it again, if we enter number 2, it will match it with the case number 2, so it will display number 2. Right? So the same up until number 5. See, enter a number 5. Right? So it shows as number 5. Right, but if we enter any other number, not 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, let's create this one, let's run it, enter a number, let's put 100. It doesn't show anything, but then it ends the program straight away, right? So that's because in our cases, we do not cover about 100 and we don't have any default case, which is our else case when nothing else match the value that we want to check. So this is where, so this is the same as I showed. So this is where we would write our default, and then the default, at the default, we might want to give like some warning or some sentences. Like the example over here, I put the number is invalid, right? Because in the part over here, we already say that enter a number 1 to 5. So any other number, it will display the number is invalid. So in your code, when you use switch case, it's up to you whether you want to have a default value or not. Even when you don't have the default value, as this code over here, you can still compile it, you can run it. If you have a default one, so that means that if the user enters something that is not expected, then it will go straight away to the default. Right, so you would write default, and then maybe system.out.println invalid, something like that. Right, so let's have to print on the same line so that I can make it larger and you can see the whole thing much clearer. Right, so you have your cases and then the default when nothing of this match. Right, so if we run it, let's try and run it. Let's clear this one first. Compile it, no problem. Run it, enter a number 1 to 5, enter number 4, it will show number 4. That's fine. Run it again, enter a number, enter 100, so it shows invalid. Right? Because when it checks these 5 cases, it does not match 100. So it goes to the last one. Right. Okay, so that is about the default one. Okay, so other than that, because it says in the beginning that the switch, it can be any variable or any expression, right? You can do some calculation inside of it. For example, like over here, switch, and then inside of it, number equal to number minus 2. Right, so whatever the user enter at this part, you would minus it with 2, and then only it will check the cases. Right, so this is valid. You can do it this way. So let's just show it. Number equal to number minus 2. Number equal to number minus 2. Let's do this one, run it. Say that I enter number 5. So 5 minus 2 is 3. It gives the value 3 to the number over here. So it will check case 3. Right, so when you have any calculation, it will do the right hand side first. Then it will give the assignment, give that new value that you have into your variable. So that's why it checks over here, case number 3. Right, this one, you enter 5. At this part, it will do 5 minus 2, which is 3, and give that value to number. Then only it will check the case. Right? So this is another thing that you can do with the switch. Or if you don't want to do the calculation inside of it, you can always have it before you have your switch. For example, you have number equal to number minus 2, and then switch number. So this is similar to before. Right? Like some people, they might want to save some lines of code, so they would do the expression or the calculation within the switch itself. Right, so another example, this one is, let's see, this is taking the grid, enter the grid, and then it will show it in sentence, right? So you enter C or A, B, C, it will tell you that the grid is whatever that you have entered. Right, okay. So one thing over here that we haven't seen before is this char at 0 part, because we know that when we want to take any string or some sentences, we can use next or next line for the scanner, right? But if we just want to have like one character, then we still need to use next or next line, either one that you prefer to use, because in Java there's no next char. So we have next int, next double, next float, but we don't have next char. So we need to have a way to be able to take only one character from whatever that the user enter. For example, like this one, enter the grid, the user might enter CA. But then we only want to take the first character. So to take the first character, you would write char at 0. Right, so in Java or in any programming languages, the first number or the first value will always be 0. So basically C is at index 0, A is at index 1. Right, we don't care about A, we just want to get the value of the first letter or the first character. So that's why we write dot char at 0. Right, so in this one as well, if you don't write char at 0, if you don't have it, it will give you an error because next is for string, but our grid over here is type char. Right, so we can try it out. Let's have this one. Let's copy it. I think I still need to do the changes afterwards because it will not copy things correctly. Okay, char grid, we have our scanner, enter the grid, okay. Enter the grid and then grid input next, okay, next dot char at 0. And then we have our switch. So which grid we have the curly bracket opening or braces, and then over here we will close it. This one, let's tap it in. Right, so if you copy paste it, when you are copying any string or char, if it does not show you in green, there's something wrong with it. Right, like over here, what's wrong with it is the code that is incorrect. Changing that one. Okay, the grid is A. Let's have break on the same line. And then this is the same thing. The grid is F. Okay. Oops. The last one, the grid is invalid. Okay, it should be correct now. Oh wait, system.in did not close it. I forgot the semicolon. Okay, right, compile it. Right, so there's no error. Right, so whenever you have the error, you should go through what error that it shows you over here. Right, it basically tells you which line and what is the error of it. Like this one, I forgot to write the semicolon just now. It says it expects the semicolon and I did not have it after my break. Okay, right, so let's run this one. Enter the grid, say that I enter C. So it shows me the grid is C. Right, so this is showing that now we have char, a character. The example before we have number. So when we have number, for the case, we don't have to write any single quote or double quote because those numbers are int or double or float. Right, we can write it straight away. But for char, we need to use the single quote. For any string, then we need to use the double quote. Okay, so just to show that if we don't have char at 0 over here, let's remove it. So we just use next as usual. That one. Alright, so when you compile it, it tells you the error. It says string cannot be converted to char because next is for string. Even next line, even next line, that is also for string. Next line, ln, wait, that is not the correct one, right? Is it that one? I cannot remember what's the function of it. I have this somewhere scanner. Scanner, next line, next. Yep, see, it's next line, L-I-N-E. Right, so the thing about it is that is type string, so you cannot use it when you want to use char. Right, but if you change this one to string, if you change that one to string, then your cases you need to use double quotes. Because whenever it's string, double quote. If char, single quote. So if I change it this way, let's click this one, compile it, then it doesn't give me any error. Right? So you need to make sure of your data type would be what it expects whenever you are calling some kind of like methods. Like this one, the next line or next, it is type string, so it would expect your grid to be type string. But if you are using string, see that I enter something like that, it will show me grid is invalid because whatever that I enter, it takes the whole thing. Right? It takes everything. Let's see, for string, I don't think this one, because this would be, well, let me just try it out. Yep. So even when you have the string, you only want to take the first character of it, it will give you an error saying that because you have a string, but then over here you want to have it as a type char. Right, so you can see that when you have different data types, you cannot kind of like mix it. There should be like a way around to be able to use some of the methods that those methods it expect some kind of data type. Right, so if I change this one back to char and also this one to single quote, okay, this one, run it, enter the grid. It shows the grid is A because it only care about the first one. So it only care about the first letter. Right? So this is another useful method that you might want to use when you are using char data type, right? In case the user enter something else. Right, so do you still remember what's the difference between next and also next line? So what would be the difference if you do input.next and also input.next line? Do you still remember about it? Let me just comment out this one. See that I have, let's have another variable. Let's have string. So that it's easier, we don't have to use char at. String enter equal, string enter equal to input.next. So what's the difference of that, of the print line? We use entered that value. And what if we have another one over here? Enter the grid. Over here we use next line. Do you still remember what's the difference of next and also next line? Right, so if I run it over here, say enter the grid. Well, it should enter something. Wait, let's change it a bit. Enter. So I'll put it over here so that if we want to use later on, we have it. Enter your name, for example. Right, so enter your name. So the first one is we are at this point. Right, we are using next. See that I put my name. Right, so this one I need to force it. But anyway, what I want to say is because it used next, even though you enter two things, it will only take the first one. Right, when it finds any of the space, then the rest of it will just ignore it. This one, let's see. Right. So whenever you have, well, the thing is because you use next, it ends, the cursor ends at the end of it. It does not go to the next line. That's why what you saw earlier, it skips and did not read this line at all. Right. So one way when you have this kind of problem is force it to go to the next line. Like this one, I put input dot next line. I'm not taking any input at this part, but basically, I just want it to jump to go to the next line. All right. Your friend said it's lagging. Is it lagging for the rest of you as well? Is it lagging or is it okay? So your friend said she can't hear me. Wait, let me write in WhatsApp. Okay. What about other people? Is it lagging? Is it okay? Okay, so it was lagging earlier. Right, so anyway, I'll go back about this one. Right, but let me know if it lags. You can put it in WhatsApp because otherwise I'll keep on going. Right, so what I mentioned just now is, okay, the one that you saw earlier, say that I have enter your name and then we have input.next. And then the next line, it will display what you have entered. And then you would ask the user to enter your name again. And then this time you are using next line, right? And then it display what you have entered. So as I mentioned before, when you use next, whenever it finds a space, it will not take whatever that comes after that, right? If you want to have like the full sentence, then you should use next line, because for next line, it takes up until you enter, you click enter, and it takes everything. Right, but the problem with this one just now, save it. Oh, let me end it first. Okay, so running it, it asks enter your name. So just put my name. When I click on enter, it display you have entered Adila, right? And then when it gets to this part, it prints out enter your name, but then it ends it straight away. Right? So this is because when you use next and then you use next line right after it, at this next part, basically it ends kind of like the cursor ends at the end of it. It does not go to the next line. Right? So that's why it skips this part straight away. So what you can do when you have this kind of problem is to force it to go to the next line. And the way that you would force it, you just would write input.nextLine. You are not taking any input at this point. This is just forcing it to finish up with the previous one. Right, so if I run it, enter your name. So this is the first one. You have entered Adila. And now it's asking me for the second part. Right, and because it is next line, whatever that I entered, it takes the whole thing. Right, is it okay about this one? Because I think that in your assignment or in any other program that you might write, you would encounter this kind of problem where you have to force it to finish up the previous one. Well, it's basically to clear the buffer, I think, the real term of it. Right, so that's kind of like a bit revision about the next and next line. All right, so I'll go back to our slides. All right, so this is showing that when you have char, you only want to take one character, then you would write dot char at 0. All right, so 0 would means it will read the first one. All right, so your friend asked, can you repeat about next line? Let's go back just now. Okay, next line. All right. Is it this part or about next line in general? Okay, wait, let me comment this one out first. Okay. Right. Okay, this is looking at the next method. Right. So with next, if I run it, if I enter Adila Nordin, because over here we are using the next method, it will only take the first part, right? Because whenever it finds any space, it will just ignore the rest of it. Okay, so comparing that to using the next line method, if we are using next line, enter your name, Adila Nordin, it will take the whole thing, right? So it doesn't matter how many characters or how long your sentence is. It will take the whole thing until you click enter. Right, so this is about the next and also next line. The one that I showed you earlier, if say that you are combining next and next line, right? For example, like this one, enter your name, you would use next. And then over here, you ask to enter your name again, but then you use next line. All right. So what happens over here is, because over here is next, it does not finish it yet. So when you run this one, enter your name. So basically this is at this part right now. When I click on enter, it prints out you have entered Dila, and then it prints out enter your name, and it does not wait for me to enter something anymore, even though it should have. Right? So the way around it to make sure that this line will be executed is by forcing it to finish up with the previous one. So I will just write input.next line. So you should not, you shouldn't put any variable in front of it. Right. Just make it as simple as possible. So just write input.next line, where it will force whatever previous one to be finished before it is ready to take a new input. Right, so running it, so this is the first part, which is the next. It says you have entered Adila, and then going at this part, enter your name, and now it expects me to write something. So this is, at that part is input.next line. Right? So this is just one of the things that you might happen to come across when you are using and combining next line, next int, those kind of things. Right? When it skip it, then that just means that you need to force it to go to the next line. Right, so I'll post this one up on your OL so that you can play around with it, and as kind of like a guide in case you encounter this kind of problem later on. All right, is it okay about this? Okay. Right, so I'll go back over here. Right, so if you don't want to use char at 0, as I mentioned before, then you should change the data type to string. Then this one you would use double quote. Right, so you can see that how they are related to one another with the data types and also the cases, the value of the cases. Right. In this one as well, it doesn't matter whether you use next or next line, because as long as you just care about the first character, then it doesn't matter whether it takes the whole sentence or not, because towards the end, you only read the first letter. Right, so in this one over here is, well, it's showing when the user enter the correct grade, for example, just C. Okay, so in this one, if you look over here, what happens if the user enters small letter C? Right, so when the user enters small letter C, even though we have C over here, capital letter and small letter, they are two different things. So that's why when you run this one, it will show that the grade is invalid, even though you enter C. Right? This is because they are of different capital and small letter. So in this kind of case, what you can do is you can add another case. Right? For example, over here, just above the case capital C, you would write case small letter c. Right? When you write it this way, we don't have any break, right, in the C. So what happens is, okay, it finds the grade that you enter, which is small letter C. It finds it. There's no break within your statement, so it will continue with whatever statement afterwards. So basically, you are saying that this case small letter C would print out the grade is C over here. Right, so this save you time rather than you have to write system.out.println, the grade is C, and repeatedly writing these two lines for your small letter C. Right, so this is one of the good things about not having the break. You don't have the break, so it will just keep on whatever that comes afterwards. Does this one make sense? Right, because in switch case, you cannot use the AND or even the OR operator. This is the only way that you can combine, well, kind of like combine the different cases to display the same output. Right, so you cannot use the AND, you cannot use the OR. Right, so let's just show the code itself. In case I deleted it. This one. Enter scanner. Right, so we still need the scanner. Enter the grade. Let's put it at one place. Copy. Paste it here. Right, so this is the same as before. Save it. Oh wait, then you remove that comment. Right, so this is the same as before. See that if I enter capital C, that's fine. If I run it and enter small letter C, then it shows the grade is invalid, right? As the code that in your slide showed, if you want it to display the same thing, what you can do is you can write the keys and then do nothing to it, right? Because you don't have any break over there, it will continue with the next line. And then because our next line over here have the break, it will not continue with case D and also case F and also default. Okay, so trying this one out. Enter the grade. If I enter capital C, doesn't make any difference. Run it again. If I enter small letter C, Now it shows the grade is also C, right? It does not show invalid because capital C, small letter c, it will print out that part. Right, if you want it to be for A, B, D, and F, then you need to include the cases. Case A, case B. You can have space. And case D. And also case F. Right, so basically you are covering capital letter and small letter for all of them. So there's no error. Let's click this one. If I run it, enter the grade. If I enter small letter A, then it will print out this part. Right, so the same goes for case B, case C, case D, and also case F. So I just put the space over here so that it's much easier to see what will be printed out. If you don't want to have the space, that's fine as well, because the space does not mean anything. Is it okay about this one? So of course, if you don't want to write this way, you can always write the code like this, right? Meaning that if capital or if small letter A, it will print out the grade is A. If small letter B, it will print out the grade is B, and so on. But you can see that you don't actually need to write this line of codes. You don't need to repeatedly writing the same thing. Right? When you can do a much easier way by not having any break and then kind of like combining this small letter A with capital letter A. Does it make sense for that one? About how you can deal with different value to have the same kind of like output or any statements. Right, so in your code, it can be anything. So maybe you want to have like several cases to display the same thing. Case, oh wait, you cannot have AA because that is not a char. For example, Q or something else. Right, so there's no limit to how many cases. If say that I put over here case Z, Q, A, and capital A, so all of them will print out the grade is A. Right, so you can do this kind of thing to combine several of them. So this is similar to if you have your if, you would write something like your if grade equal to Z or A case grade equal to Q or grade equal to small letter A or grade equal to capital A. Right, so this is similar to writing it that way. Alright, so that's why I mentioned just now, if you don't want to use switch case, you can always use if else. Is it okay? This one, just to look back at the switch case and also the if else. So that's why we are learning about selection. We cover both of them. Okay, right, so let me comment this one out and let's remove that part. Okay, continuing from here. Right, so another way that we can do it, instead of having the case that covers small letter, capital letter, is we can use this method called two uppercase, or we can have two lowercase, where whenever the user input something, the user input the grade over here, we are forcing it to go to uppercase. It will change it to uppercase and then save it inside our variable call grid. Then only it will check within our switch. Right, so what happens over here is it calls the toUpperCase method, and that toUpperCase method is within the character class. And I put a link to uppercase, this one. Right, so this is looking at the API, the Java API. Let's see, to uppercase. Right, so it says over here, to uppercase converts the character to uppercase. If you don't want to use to uppercase, there's also to lowercase. To lowercase, this one, where whatever that you enter, it will change it to lowercase. Right. There's also another one about ignore case, but I think that is for string, not for char. So there are always ways around. If you don't want to write several of the cases where you would force it to change to uppercase, lowercase, or ignore the case altogether. Right. In the example over here, if the user enters small letter C, you force it to be uppercase so that you don't have to change your cases. It will always be uppercase. Alright, so you can try and run the code and then see what happens. Right, in this part, right, so this is the one that I told you earlier. So in switch case, you cannot use the or, and, any of those operators. If you try and do it that way, it will give you an error. Let's have that one. Right, so it tells you illegal start of expression. If you want to use the or operator, then you should use if and also if else. Right, so this is just telling you about the break statement. So I have mentioned before. It says that break statement is used as the last statement in each cases statement list to transfer to the end of the switch statement. So it does not check the other cases that you have. If it is not used, the flow of control will continue into the next case. Right, so it's important that if you need to have break, you should write the break. So example over here, same as before, when we want to have small letter and capital letter, we want to combine them so we don't have the break. So it will continue with the next line and it prints out the grade is C as what we have seen in the code that we ran earlier. Right, so another example over here is showing when you have the break and also when you don't have the break, and also how you would draw the flowchart. Alright, so the first thing first, so this T and F you should write in full, you should write as true and false. Small letter T and also small letter F. What did I press? True, false. Okay, this one, it should be true and also over here, false. Right, so in the code over here, we have switch n, and then we have n would be some number, and then we have case 1 and so case 2. So case 1, if n is equal to 1, it will give us x equal to 20. If n is equal to 2, we would go to case 2, and then we say that x is equal to 40. any other number other than 1 and 2, it will go to the default and it will say that x is equal to 60. So that's basically what this is doing over here. Right, and you can see that there's no break at all. So when there's no break, say that the user enter n equal to 1. Right, when the user n equal to 1, it goes through case number 1, and then it says x equal to 20, and continue with the next line, x equal to 40, and then x equal to 60. So the flowchart of it is basically going through this part where whenever it is true, x equal to 20, and then it will continue with the next line, which is x equal to 40, and then x equal to 60. It does not check the cases anymore, but it will execute all the lines of codes that you have after the first case that is true. Right? I guess that in some programs you might want to do this kind of things. If say that whenever it finds the correct one, the correct value of n, you want it to exit the switch straight away. So you would write the break. So in your flowchart, you would write break within the rectangle. And then what happens is it will, the arrow of it, it will point to the end or anywhere outside of the switch cases. Right, so you have x equal to 20, whenever that is true, and then break, end it. If your n is equal to 2, for example, then it will go when n is equal to 2, x equal to 40, it finds the break, and then it ends the program. Right, so similarly for the default as well. But for the default, as I mentioned before, you can write the break, but you don't need to write the break because default is already the last line within your switch case. So there's nothing that comes after it. So without the break, it will still end your switch. Is it okay about the flowchart when you have the break and also when you don't have the break on how to draw it? All right, so let's look at the next one. All right, so this is similar as before, but this one is writing in code where it used the system.out.println. The one over here, it just say x equal to 20. So you will not see any output at all. If you want to see some kind of like output, then you should use system.out.println. Right, so using system.out.println or system.out.print, that is good if you want to debug your code. You want to see what happens at this point in your code. Right, so you can try and run this code where in this example, I say that int n equal to 2 straight away. So it will pass the value of 2. It finds that case 2 is equal to 2. So it prints out x equal to 40 and then exit the switch case. Right, so the other one over here is without the break, where if you run it, it will print out, say n is equal to 2 again, n equal to 2. It checks the first case, that is not equal to 2. It checks the second case, case is equal to 2, that is correct. So it prints out x equal to 40. There's no break over here. It continues with the next one and prints out x equal to 60. So the output that you get when you run this program is you get x equal to 40, x equal to 60. Right, this is another example as well. In this example, see this one. This one is basically want to show about the different data types. This one is int, this one is char. Where for the cases when it is int, then you would write the value straight away. For char, because you know it's character, just one letter or one symbol, you would use single quote. Right, and also in this example over here you have the break, and over here you don't have the break. Right, so similar as before, when you don't have the break, it finds the correct value for your case, and then whatever that comes after it, it will print it out as well. Right, let's see what is doing over here. Right, so this is going back to the example from before, where you have the break and when you remove the break. Right, so you enter the grade C, it prints out the grade is C, and then break. So basically exit the switch. In the other one over here, when you don't have the break, you enter the grade is C, it finds the correct one, C is equal to C, it prints out the grade is C, and then continue with the rest of the cases within that switch. Alright, so we have covered about this one. When you want to have capital letter, small letter, then you can have the case capital A, case small letter A, and you don't have any break between them. There's no break over here, so that it will read whatever inside your case A over here as if that is within the case capital A. Right, and as I showed before, for this type of thing, if you write it within if, then you can use the or, and also you can use the and operator depending on what you want your program to do. Right, so your friend asked default refer to what? Default, which default? Is it this one or the previous slide? Right, so if we look at previous one, this one. So default in any of your switch case, so this default would refer to any other value other than being covered within your cases, other than A, B, C, D, and F. Right, so basically default is anything else. If you have your if else, that is the last part of your else. Right, so in your switch case, you can choose to have default or you can choose not to have default. If you don't have default, what happens is if you enter the grid Z, it checks at each of them, it doesn't find any Z, so it just exits the switch without printing out anything. When we have the default, if we enter Z, it checks the cases. It's not the same as A, B, C, D, and F. It's none of them, so it will go to the default and print out the grade is invalid. Right, so basically the default is to have like a safe kind of like safe sentence or safe output, just to say you entered something wrong. Right, if you don't have the default, if you enter Z, it doesn't show anything. The user might not know what goes wrong inside or whatever that they have input. Does it make sense about the use of default? All right. Right, so this is another example as well, where, okay, so in this one, it's basically you repeatedly wrote the same code kind of like twice, when you don't have to, when you can combine it and you don't have to write the same code twice, right? But this, when you write it this way, it is still correct. You will still get the same output, only that you are writing more than what you need to write. Let's see what else we have. In this one over here, so this is just to show that from writing the switch case, you can also write it as if else. And within the if else, there are several ways of, well, two ways of doing it. Right, so in looking at the switch first, it says we have int number equal to 1, x equal to 2, and then switch x, so we will pass in the value x equal to 2 over there. We have case 1, case 2, case 3. So for case 1, case 2, case 3, what they will do is they will do number plus plus and then break. If the user enter or the x value is 4, it will do number plus equal to 4 plus 4 plus equal 4 and then break. If it's any other value other than 1, 2, 3, 4, it will go to the default and it will do number plus equal 5. Right? And as I mentioned before, you don't actually need to write the break over here because default, that is the last line within your switch. Right, so over here, the important part is if x is equal to 1, 2, or 3, it will do number plus plus. Right? So when you write in your if else, two ways of doing it. One is as what we kind of like saw earlier, you can use the OR operator. Right? If x equal to 1 or x equal to 2 or x equal to 3, then it will do number plus plus. Right? Another way of doing it, because you don't want to use OR, and you know that 1, 2, 3, there's a range of it, you can always write something like this. If x larger equal to 1 and x less equal to 3. So basically you are giving it the range of 1 until 3. Right? But they are still doing the same thing, only using different operator. Right, so all these three codes, slightly different way of writing, but they would still give you the same output if you run it. Right, so any question for this one? Right, so no question of that one. Let's look at this part. Right. Okay, so this one, what is the value of J after this switch statements? Right, so for the first one, so let's quickly do the first one. We have int I equal to 1, int j equal to 0. And then we have switch I plus 1. We have case 0, j equal to 0, case 1, j equal to 1, case 2, j equal to 3, and then default, j equal to minus 2. So what do you think the value of j in the first part? This one. So I'll give you a few minutes to try and find out what is the value of j. Try and do it manually, I mean like by hand, rather than trying and run the code. Well, you can try and run the code just to double check whether you get the correct value or not for your j. So the value of j, so anybody have gotten the value of j? See that we have, let me write over here. See that after your switch case over there, we have over here, so this is outside the switch case, we have our system.out print line and then printing out the value of j. So we want to know what will be printed out at this last part. Does it print out j is 0 or is it j is 1, j is 3 or is it j is minus 2? Right, so your friend said j is minus 2. So that's correct. Everyone else understand how you can get minus 2? Okay, so let's go through it line by line. Right, so we have switch I plus 1. So we know that inside the switch, we can do some calculation and expression. So we know that the value of I is 1. So over here, we are doing 1 plus 1, which gives us 2. So basically at this point, we are doing switch 2, right? So switch 2, we know that 2 is case number 2, which is that one. So at case number 2, we say that j is equal to 3, right? But we don't have any break. When we don't have any break, anything that comes after it, it will be executed. So after case 2, we still have this default, right? Where default j equal to 2. So it replaced the value of j equal to 3 and it becomes j equal to 2. So that's why the final output, we get that the value of our j is minus 2. Right? Is it okay? Or anybody else is still confused on how you can get minus 2 in this one? Right, so it's basically just to be aware on the code whether they have the break or not. Okay. Right, so what about the second one? So what would be the value of j? Right, so the value of j is 3. Right, okay, so all of you got it 3. Right, so similar as before, but this one you have the break. Right, so it reads through case 2, j equal to 3, and then break, so it exits the switch case. So that's why you get j equal to 3. Right, so well done. Let's look at, okay, so before we look at this one, let's look at this part first, because in this one, it give you the answer at the right hand side, right? So this one is just showing how you can use switch and also represent it in if else. Right, so this is similar to the example that we saw before, where we have case 1, 2, 3, and 4. What they would do is they would do number equal to number times 2. And then we have case 5 doing something else, and then the default value, well, the default case, it will do number minus minus. Right, so the default, it will be at the final else. The case 1, 2, 3, 4, you can have it as a range within the condition of your if. Right? So if x larger equal to 1 and x less equal to 4. So basically the value from 1 to 4. What it will do is it will do number equal to number times 2, which is the same as what you can see inside your switch. Right? Or if you don't want to have the range of it, we can do as similar as we saw before. We can have if x equal to 1 or x equal to 2 or x equal to 3 or x equal to 4. And then we would do number equal to number times 2. Right? Just different ways of writing it. Still the same thing. Okay,